He thought his secrets were safe. But at his cousin's wedding, 3 children who looked exactly like him walked through those ballroom doors with the woman he'd been visiting every Thursday night. His wife saw them first. In that single moment, a marriage of 7 years collapsed. A family fractured. Everything imploded. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you're watching from and don't forget to click subscribe. The labor ward at Westchester Medical Center smelled like antiseptic and fear. Marcus Wellington stood outside room 412, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the linoleum with each anxious step. Through the door's small window, he could see his wife Aisha in the bed, her dark skin glistening with sweat, her face contorted in pain as another contraction seized her body. She was due any minute. The baby, their baby, was coming. He checked his phone. 11:47 p.m. The timing was terrible. But then again, babies didn't consult calendars. Marcus had been in the middle of closing the Hendricks acquisition when Aisha called. 3 weeks early. The doctor said it happened sometimes, especially with the stress she'd been under. The merger had been consuming him for months. She'd been patient about it. Patient about everything, really. His phone buzzed. Another message from Diane, his secretary. Or that's what he told himself when the text started becoming something other than work-related 6 months ago. Where are you? I miss you. He'd deleted the previous messages. All of them. And there were many. But he hadn't deleted this one yet. He wouldn't. Not tonight. Tonight he'd deal with it later, after the baby was born, after everything had calmed down. Tonight was about Aisha and the child they'd created together. The child that was supposed to save their marriage. A nurse emerged from the room, clipboard in hand. Mr. Wellington, your wife is asking for you. Marcus pocketed his phone quickly, as if the nurse might have seen the screen, as if she could read the shame radiating from him like heat off asphalt. He moved toward the door, his hand on the handle, when his phone buzzed again. Not a message this time. A call. Diane's name lit up the screen. He declined it, his thumb moving mechanically. But the damage was done. The guilt had crystallized into something solid in his chest. Inside the room, Aisha gripped the hospital bed rail, her breathing shallow and rapid. She was magnificent in her agony, powerful in her vulnerability. At 34, she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Her features were sharp and regal, high cheekbones, full lips, intelligent eyes that had first drawn him in at a gallery opening 7 years ago. She was wearing a hospital gown now, her black hair pulled back in a messy bun, but she still commanded the space with an effortless grace that made him wonder, not for the first time, what he was doing throwing it away. You came, she said, reaching for his hand between contractions. Of course I came. He took her hand, noting how small it felt in his grip, how fragile despite her strength. Where else would I be? The question hung in the air for a moment too long. She studied his face, and he wondered if she could see the lie written across it. If she could somehow sense that part of him was elsewhere, with someone else, even as he stood there holding her hand. The Hendricks deal, she asked, another contraction beginning to build. Finished it by phone. Nothing matters right now except you and the baby. She squeezed his hand hard as the contraction peaked. He felt the bite of her fingernails into his palm and told himself it was penance. It wasn't nearly enough. The hours blurred. Contractions came and went. The machines beeped their electronic rhythm. Aisha labored through the night with a determination that was almost humbling, and Marcus sat beside her, holding her hand, breathing with her through each wave of pain, and hating himself with an intensity that surprised him. At 3:17 a.m., their son was born. 8 pounds, 3 ounces, healthy lungs, 10 perfect fingers and toes. The doctor placed him on Aisha's chest, and she wept with a joy so pure it broke something in Marcus that he didn't think could break any further. He's perfect, she whispered, looking up at Marcus with tears streaming down her face. We made him. We made this perfect human. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. The baby's tiny fist gripped his finger, and for just a moment, he felt something shift. A possibility of redemption, a chance to be better, to choose differently, to honor this woman who had given him everything. He was so focused on his son's face, the way his features were a combination of both his and Aisha's, the small miracle of genetic collaboration, that he almost didn't notice his phone vibrating in his pocket. Almost. But he did notice. And while Aisha was staring at their newborn son, tears of joy still wet on her cheeks, Marcus felt his phone vibrating again and again. 3 messages in rapid succession. He didn't look. He didn't need to look to know who they were from. Diane had been the mistake that had bloomed into a pattern. It started innocuously enough. Late nights at the office, business discussions over drinks, a hand lingering on his arm a moment too long. She was attractive in a sharp, calculated way, blonde, ambitious, hungry in a manner that Aisha had never been. Where his wife was content with their life, with their home in Connecticut, with quiet Sunday mornings and dinner parties with their friends, Diane wanted more. She wanted him to want more. She wanted him to want her. The affair hadn't been planned. It had simply happened, the way affairs always do, through a series of small decisions that seemed inconsequential at the time but accumulated into betrayal. And now his son was in his wife's arms, and his mistress was texting him in the delivery room of his child's birth. "We should name him David," Aisha said softly, not looking away from the baby's face. "After my grandfather. He was a good man. Strong, faithful, devoted to his family." Marcus felt something in his stomach twist. David. A name heavy with expectation and meaning. A name that suggested character and integrity and all the things he was actively choosing not to be. "David," he repeated. "Yes, David is perfect." The next 4 hours were a kaleidoscope of firsts. The first time David nursed. The first time Marcus cut the umbilical cord, a task that felt inadequate to the enormity of the moment. Nurses came and went, checking vital signs, bringing ice chips, adjusting medications. The morning light began to creep through the hospital window, turning the room gold. At 7:30 a.m., Aisha's mother arrived, flowers in hand and tears in her eyes. Behind her came Marcus's own mother, looking simultaneously proud and concerned in the way mothers do. The room filled with the sound of joy and congratulations and the small rituals of family. Marcus excused himself to take a shower and change into fresh clothes. The hospital had a shower room for family members. He locked the door and sat on the tiled floor, fully clothed, and tried to breathe. His phone had 13 missed calls, 23 text messages, some from Diane, some from his CFO about documents he needed to sign, some from his attorney about the final paperwork on the Hendricks deal, but most were from Diane. "Call me. I need to talk to you. I'm pregnant, Marcus. I'm pregnant and I don't know what to do." He read that last one 3 times, waiting for it to make sense, for the words to rearrange themselves into something other than what they clearly said. It didn't happen. His hands were shaking as he called her back. She answered on the first ring. "I didn't know how else to tell you," Diane said without preamble, her voice tight with panic. "I took the test this morning. 3 times. They were all positive. Marcus, what are we going to do?" "When?" he managed to ask. "About a month ago. We didn't use protection that night at the Peninsula Hotel. You said you wanted to feel close to me, that the barrier between us felt like—" "I don't remember," he lied. "You don't remember?" Her voice climbed higher. "You told me you loved me that night. You said you were going to leave her, and that we were going to start over. You said—" "I was drunk." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Diane, I was drunk and I wasn't thinking clearly." "That's not what I want. I don't want that. You wanted it at the Peninsula Hotel." "I was wrong." The words sounded hollow, even to his own ears. He'd said them before about other things. He'd always meant them in the moment, but he'd never quite managed to live them. "I'm not getting rid of it," Diane said, her voice hardening into something steel-edged and certain. "I don't care if you want this or not, Marcus. I'm having this baby." The phone felt heavy in his hand. "Don't do anything yet," he heard himself say. "Don't do anything until we've talked this through properly. We can talk through it right now. Not like this. Not over the phone. I need to think. I need to figure out what to do. What to do, she laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. There's nothing to figure out, Marcus. I'm pregnant with your child. That's not a puzzle to solve, that's a reality. After she hung up, Marcus sat in that shower room for a long time. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. His reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, a man he didn't recognize and wouldn't want to know. He had just become a father. He was also about to become a father again. And the woman in the hospital bed upstairs, the woman who had just given him the greatest gift of his life, had no idea. The first 5 years passed in the way that time always does when you're living a double life, quickly and without leaving much of a mark. The illusion of being in two places at once, the careful construction of lies that had to be constantly reinforced, the near-constant state of anxiety that someone would discover the truth. David grew from an infant into a boy with his mother's sharp features and his father's stubborn temperament. He was precocious, intelligent, demanding in the way that children are when they sense that the world should revolve around them. Because in his case, it should have. Marcus loved him with an intensity that sometimes frightened him. The boy was his redemption and his damnation all at once. Aisha thrived as a mother. She left her job at the architecture firm to focus on raising David, a decision that Marcus had supported enthusiastically and had secretly resented because it meant she was always home, always present, always a reminder of what he was destroying. She was happy in a way that seemed almost naive to him now, unaware that her husband was spending 2 nights a week in an apartment in Manhattan with a woman who had given him 3 children over the years. Triplets, as it turned out, born just 14 months after David. The triplets were the reason the apartment had become necessary. Diane had kept the pregnancy and had made sure that Marcus understood he was responsible for the financial support of all 3. It was blackmail, essentially, though she would never have framed it that way. It was simply the cost of his infidelity, paid monthly and without question, because Marcus couldn't bear the thought of his biological children living in poverty while he lived in Connecticut in a $5 million estate. He told Aisha he was working late. He told her about fictitious business trips. He created an entire architecture of deception so intricate that sometimes he forgot which version of his life was real. The guilt became background noise after a while, the constant hum of the highway that you stop hearing after you live next to it long enough. Aisha occasionally asked about his late nights. She sometimes expressed frustration about his absences. But she loved him, and love makes people willing to accept explanations they might not entirely believe. Or perhaps she did believe them. Perhaps she simply didn't want to know the truth badly enough to demand it. Their marriage became a thing of habit and courtesy. They slept in the same bed, but not touching. They had dinner together, but didn't talk. They maintained the appearance of a partnership while living increasingly separate lives. Marcus told himself this was better. Better for David, who still had both his parents under one roof. Better for Aisha, who didn't have to face the humiliation of a public divorce. Better for everyone, really, except for the part of Marcus's soul that seemed to be slowly calcifying into something that felt less like conscience and more like scar tissue. When David was 5, just as the triplets were turning 4, Aisha suggested marriage counseling. Marcus had refused with an argument about his schedule that they both knew was a lie. She'd let it go, the way she let everything go now. That same year, Marcus's father died. The funeral was held on a Saturday, and Marcus brought David but not Aisha, claiming she had a stomach bug. He was terrified someone might say something, might allude to his other children, might accidentally tear away the veil he'd constructed so carefully. Nobody did. His family was too well-bred to mention anything so unseemly. After the service, at the reception at his parents' house in Greenwich, Marcus's older sister Catherine pulled him aside into his father's study. "You're miserable," she said without preamble. Catherine had always been the direct one, the family truth-teller. "I'm fine. You're lying. You've always been terrible at lying, by the way. Your face gives everything away if you look too long." Marcus turned away from her, ostensibly to pour himself a drink. "I'm adjusting. Dad's death is fresh. It's not about Dad." Catherine moved closer, her voice dropping. It's about the fact that you look at Aisha the way a man looks at a life sentence. And she looks at you the way a woman looks at someone she's still hoping will become the man she thought he was. It's painful to watch. I don't want to have this conversation. I know you don't. That's what makes it important. She paused. Is there someone else? The question landed between them like a grenade. Marcus was silent for just a fraction of a second too long. Oh my God, Catherine said. There is. Marcus, how could you? You don't understand. Understand what? How to treat your wife like garbage. How to turn your marriage into a performance for other people's benefit. How to... Enough. His voice was harder than he intended. Catherine studied him for a long moment. She'll find out eventually. They always do. And when she does, everything you're trying to protect, David, your comfortable life, whatever lies you've been telling yourself, it will all come apart. Is it worth it? He didn't answer because any answer would be another lie, and he'd already exhausted his quota for the week. The confrontation with Catherine had shaken something loose in him, though. It had given him the first glimmer of awareness that the structure he'd built was not, in fact, as durable as he'd believed. That cracks had formed and were spreading, that eventually, something would have to give. He told Diane they needed to talk about increasing her support payments for the triplets. She'd been dropping hints about wanting to move to a better apartment, one with more space for 3 growing children. He'd been receptive to the idea, partly because the children deserved better, partly because having them in a nicer place made him feel slightly less monstrous about his absence from their lives. What he hadn't expected was the conversation that followed. I want to get married, Diane said. They were in the apartment, their usual Thursday night encounter just finishing. She was already dressed, always efficient, always aware that his time was limited and rationed. That's not possible. Why not? You could divorce her. We could build a real life together. Our children could have a real father, not a part-time visitor who brings expensive gifts and leaves before bedtime. Aisha doesn't deserve that. Diane laughed, sharp and cold. Aisha doesn't deserve it? What about what I deserve? What about what your children deserve? I've raised 3 children on your money and your broken promises. I'm 35 years old, and I'm still mistress instead of wife. Don't I deserve better than that? He couldn't look at her, because she was right, and looking at her meant acknowledging the magnitude of what he'd done, what he was continuing to do, with every choice not to change the situation. I need time, he said. You've had 5 years. After she left, Marcus sat in the apartment and felt something crystallize inside him. The shame had a new quality now. It was no longer background noise. It was a voice demanding to be heard, insisting that the life he'd constructed was not actually a life at all, but a kind of prolonged death. A slow erosion of everything that made him a human being worth anything. He should leave Aisha. He knew this objectively. It would be kinder to her to be honest, to give her the opportunity to find someone who could be fully present with her, who could love her without reservation or division of spirit. But he was a coward. And cowardice, he was discovering, was perhaps the only truly consistent thing about him. The wedding invitations went out 6 months later. Not his wedding, his cousin's wedding. His cousin Theodore, a partner at a prestigious law firm, was marrying a woman named Victoria, a museum curator from Boston. It was going to be the social event of the season, or so the invitation suggested. Black tie, open bar, held at the Peninsula Hotel in Manhattan, with a reception following at a private club in Tribeca. Aisha was excited in a way Marcus hadn't seen her in years. She bought a new dress, a stunning floor-length gown in deep emerald that complemented her skin tone perfectly. She had her hair done at a salon in New York, something she rarely indulged in. She was almost glowing, as if a wedding, even someone else's wedding, had rekindled something in her that marriage to Marcus had nearly extinguished. He watched her get ready on the morning of the event, and felt something inside him break a little more. You look beautiful, he told her, and meant it. Thank you. She smiled, and it occurred to him that she was still waiting for him to love her the way she deserved to be loved. She was still hoping. Even after 5 years of his distance, his absences, his emotional withdrawal, she was still waiting for him to choose her. David was in a suit, uncomfortable and squirming. He was 5 years old, too young to understand why he had to dress up for a party where no children were invited. Marcus's mother had agreed to watch him for the evening, something that required a small lie about there being no children's portion of the celebration. The drive into the city was tense. Aisha talked about the wedding, speculated about who would be there, mentioned that she was hoping they might actually spend some quality time together at the reception. No late-night phone calls from the office. No ducking out early for fabricated emergencies. Marcus nodded and drove and said nothing. The Peninsula Hotel was exactly as he'd known it would be. Elegant. Expensive. Decorated with flowers and ribbons and all the trappings of a celebration of love. The irony was not lost on him. They checked in and went to the bride's room first, a tradition. Aisha mingled with the other women, her intelligence and grace making her the center of attention almost immediately. She was good at this, at being a wife in public. It was the part that happened behind closed doors where they both failed. The ceremony was in the ballroom. Marcus sat beside Aisha and watched his cousin exchange vows, and felt the weight of his own failures pressing down on him like a physical thing. "Believe in marriage," Theodore said to Victoria, and Marcus flinched. At the cocktail hour, there was open bar and passed hors d'oeuvres and the kind of social mingling that filled the hours before dinner. Marcus found himself talking to people he hadn't spoken to in years, maintaining the illusion of a man who had his life together, whose marriage was solid, whose children were well-adjusted, whose choices were intentional rather than reactive. He was in conversation with one of Theodore's law school classmates when he saw her. She was standing near the bar, and for a moment he didn't recognize her because she was out of context, a piece of his double life that had somehow bled into his real one. But then his brain caught up with his eyes and he understood that this was actually happening. Diane was at the wedding, and she wasn't alone. She was wearing a red dress that hugged her figure, and her blonde hair was in an elaborate updo, and she was holding the hands of 3 children. 3 children who, now that Marcus looked at them directly, looked exactly like him. The same sharp jawline, the same dark hair, the same way of tilting their head when they were thinking about something. They were approximately 4 years old, and they were unmistakably his. The man Marcus was talking to said something about the band, and Marcus made some automatic response, but his attention was wholly focused on the woman and the 3 children who had just walked into his carefully constructed life and blown it apart. He excused himself without explanation and moved toward the bathroom, needing a moment to process what he'd just seen, to figure out what this meant, to determine if this was actually happening or if he was having some kind of stress-induced hallucination. He splashed cold water on his face and tried to steady himself. The bathroom was empty except for him. He had maybe 5 minutes before his absence would be noticed, before Aisha would start wondering where he'd gone, before this moment would expand and consume everything. He had to find Diane. He had to find out what she was doing here, how she'd gotten an invitation, what her intention was in bringing the triplets to this event. He had to do something, though he had no idea what. When he emerged from the bathroom, she was waiting in the hallway outside. She'd left the children at the bar area, apparently finding a moment alone. "What are you doing here?" he whispered, his voice harsh. "Theodore's firm handles my company's legal matters," she said calmly. "I was invited. So were my children. You can't be here. You need to leave. You need to take them and leave right now." The apartment was silent except for the sound of Manhattan traffic below. Marcus sat on the leather sofa in the dark, still wearing his tuxedo. Diane stood across from him, still in her red dress, her hair coming loose from its arrangement. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "I don't know. But I know what I want. I want my children to know their father. I want them to understand they exist, that they matter, that they're not some shameful secret hidden on Thursday nights." She paused. "Maybe now that everything's exposed, you can actually be a real father. Aisha will divorce me. Yes, I'll lose David. Probably not. You're still his father. But your relationship with him will be rebuilt on honesty instead of this performance." Marcus understood this with absolute clarity. Whatever Aisha had felt for him, it was gone now. You didn't recover from discovering your husband fathered 3 children with another woman. I need to see Aisha, Marcus said. Not tonight. Let her process. Tomorrow is soon enough. The divorce attorney was a woman named Margaret Chen. She was in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression suggesting she'd seen the worst of human behavior. You're willing to provide full financial support for the 3 children? She confirmed. Yes, whatever is necessary. And you understand your wife is entitled to half your assets? She may also request spousal support. I understand. I want her taken care of. Margaret looked up from the documents. I've been practicing family law for 37 years. I can count on one hand the number of men who've accepted full responsibility for their infidelity. She paused. I'm going to do a good job representing you, but not because you deserve it. Because your wife deserves the best settlement possible. The house in Connecticut felt like a museum. Aisha's friends had apparently come and gone. Flowers filled the hall table. Casseroles crowded the refrigerator. His mother answered the door. She looked at him with rage and disappointment. David is sleeping. Aisha is in the study. You have 20 minutes before I'm calling your lawyer. The study was where Aisha went to think. She sat in the leather chair, not looking at him when he entered. I can explain, he said. No, you can't. I saw them. 3 children who look exactly like you. How long? 5 years, since before David was born. During my pregnancy? During your labor. She texted me while you were giving birth. Aisha made a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. And you answered? No. But I saw the message. I knew and didn't tell you. She was quiet for a long time. I want a divorce. I want the house. I want David during the week. You get him weekends if you can manage to show up. I want enough money to never work again. I want you to pay for David's education through college. I want therapy because I'll need it. And I want you to leave this house until I tell you it's okay. Okay. Don't just agree with me, she said harshly. Fight. Argue. Tell me why I should forgive you. There's nothing I can say that will make this better. I destroyed our marriage. You have every right to be furious. I am furious. But I'm also relieved. I've been living with a stranger for 5 years. Now I know why. At least I don't have to keep wondering what's wrong with me anymore. It was never about you not being enough. It was about me being completely broken. I know that now. But I didn't know it before. I wasted 5 years of my life on someone who was never going to be the person I married. Her voice broke. I wasted 5 years hoping you'd love me again. Marcus wanted to tell her he was sorry, but sorry seemed like an insult at this point. I'll move out tonight, he said. The apartment in Manhattan became his home now. A place he rented on the Upper West Side, close enough to David's school to pick him up on Friday afternoons, and close enough to Diane's apartment to spend time with the triplets. Explaining to David was harder than Marcus anticipated. The 5-year-old couldn't understand infidelity or adult complications. Mommy and Daddy will live in different places now, Marcus told him. But we both love you very much. Nothing between me and Mommy is about you. You didn't do anything wrong. Are you going to marry someone else? David asked. I don't know yet, buddy. Right now I'm just trying to be a better person. The triplets were easier in some ways, harder in others. They'd never known their father as consistent, so regular visits weren't disruptive. But they also had no history with him, no foundation of trust. We look the same, Sophie said after the second visit. We do, Marcus confirmed. Is that why Mommy says you're our daddy? Because we look the same? Partly. But also because I am your daddy. I helped make you, and I'm responsible for taking care of you. But you didn't live with us before. Marcus knelt down so they were at eye level. No, I made a very big mistake by not living with you. I was busy with work, and I made choices that meant I wasn't present the way I should have been. But I'm trying to be here now. She nodded, apparently satisfied, and went back to building blocks. The therapy his lawyer recommended became essential. Marcus's therapist was a man named Dr. Raymond, who specialized in infidelity and the psychological patterns that led to it. They met twice a week. "Tell me about your father," Dr. Raymond said during one session. He was a businessman. Very successful. Not particularly warm, but respectable. He said a man's worth was determined by what he could provide financially. And did he provide? Everything materially. Nothing emotionally. Do you think you've been trying to prove something to him? He's dead. He died right before David was born. Regardless, childhood patterns don't disappear just because the parent does. Marcus understood. His father had been emotionally absent, and Marcus had replicated that absence in his own relationships. Aisha had become a stand-in for his mother, the woman supposed to accept his emotional unavailability without complaint. The affair had been less about Diane and more about Marcus trying to prove he could compartmentalize his feelings, keep parts of himself separate and protected. "I'm not my father," Marcus said. "No, but you've been imitating his patterns. The question now is whether you keep imitating them or do something different." It took 3 months before Marcus started feeling like he was actually changing, rather than just pretending. 3 months of therapy and awkward visits with his children and negotiations with Aisha about custody and finances. 3 months before he ran into someone unexpected. It was at David's school, a parent-teacher conference. Marcus arrived early, and a woman approached who looked vaguely familiar. It took a moment to place her. Then it hit him. It was Victoria, his cousin Theodore's new wife, the woman whose wedding had been interrupted by his family's revelation. They recognized each other simultaneously. Victoria's face went carefully neutral. "Mr. Wellington," she said, extending her hand with practiced politeness. He stood and shook her hand. "Victoria, it's good to see you." "Is it?" She smiled slightly. "That's very kind of you to say, given the circumstances of our last encounter." I'm sorry about the wedding. I'm sorry my situation created such disruption on your day." "It was quite the spectacle," Victoria agreed. She seemed neither angry nor particularly sympathetic, just observant. "Though I suspect your wedding was more eventful than mine." "Considerably. How are your children?" The question was casual, but Marcus sensed it wasn't meant to be. Victoria was genuinely asking, as if she cared about the answer. "Adjusting. David is in therapy. The triplets are too young to understand what's happening yet, but I'm sure they'll need help processing it eventually." "And your wife?" "Ex-wife. Soon, officially. She's dealing with it better than I deserved her to." Victoria was called into the conference room before Marcus could say anything else. He sat back down and wondered why that interaction had affected him so much. Theodore called him a week later. "I thought I should tell you before you heard it from someone else," his cousin said. "Victoria is pregnant. Congratulations." "Thank you. She's due in December. We're having a girl." Theodore paused. "Victoria mentioned running into you at David's school. She thought you seemed like you were actually trying to change." "I am." "Good. Because frankly, you're a mess. And the least you could do is actually work on being better instead of just looking like you're working on it." Another pause. "We'd like you to come to dinner. The 4 of us, me, Victoria, you, and whoever you're seeing currently, or whoever you'll be seeing by then, if you're going to sort your life out." "I'm not seeing anyone." "I'm aware. But we thought you should know you're still welcome in the family, that what you did was terrible, but you're still our cousin." Victoria particularly wanted to extend that olive branch. "I think she's more forgiving than you deserve. Tell her thank you. Tell her I appreciate it more than I can express." The divorce was finalized in October. Aisha received the settlement she'd requested. The house belonged to her now, along with enough money to live comfortably forever. She'd already started dating. Someone had told Marcus that she'd been seen with a man at a restaurant in New York, and he'd felt complicated emotions. Relief, primarily, that she was moving on, but also jealousy that someone else would get to love her the way he'd failed to do. He didn't have the right to that jealousy anymore. David had started calling him on his own phone, a pink mobile device Aisha had activated so they could communicate. "Why did you and Mommy get divorced?" he asked one evening. Because I made mistakes. I wasn't being a very good husband. Were you a bad person? Marcus took a long time answering. I did bad things. Whether that makes me a bad person is something I'm still figuring out. Miss Patterson says people can make bad choices and still be good people if they learn and do better next time. Miss Patterson is very wise. Are you going to do better next time? Yes. I'm going to try very hard. Thanksgiving came and went. Marcus spent it with his mother and Theodore's family, which included Victoria, who was visibly pregnant and glowing. This was what his marriage with Aisha could have been. This ease, this warmth, this genuine affection. December arrived. Victoria's daughter was born, Eleanor. When Theodore called, Marcus felt something shift in his chest. We'd like you to be godfather, Theodore said. Will you accept? Spring came. Another wedding invitation arrived. It was from Aisha and David Chen, a man Marcus didn't know. The ceremony would be in Connecticut. Marcus stared at it for a long time before calling her. Hi, Aisha said when she heard his voice. No anger. Strange. I got your invitation. Yes. I wanted you to hear from the formal invitation rather than from someone else. Congratulations. I'm happy for you. Are you? Yes. I mean it. You deserve to be happy, and you deserve someone who's going to be present the way I couldn't. His name is David Chen. He's a therapist who specializes in trauma recovery. We met when I was looking for a new therapist after the divorce. She paused. He asked me why I was in therapy, and I told him my story. He said my resilience was remarkable. Then he asked me out. Marcus found himself laughing, a real laugh. That's the most therapist move I've ever heard. I know. But he's wonderful. He's kind and present and honest. All the things I needed. Another pause. I wanted you to know before the wedding that you're still welcome, that you can be comfortable being there. I'll be there, and I'll be happy for you. Genuinely. David was thrilled when Marcus told him about Aisha's wedding. He helped Marcus pick out a suit. He practiced dancing so he could dance at the reception. The ceremony was beautiful. Aisha looked radiant in a simple white dress. David Chen looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Their vows were promises of honesty and presence, and choosing each other daily. All the things Marcus had failed to do. David, dressed in a small suit, was the ring bearer. He walked down the aisle with serious concentration, and when he made eye contact with Marcus, his face broke into a smile. Marcus mouthed the words, "You got this," and David nodded, his shoulders straightening with pride. After the ceremony, during cocktails, Aisha approached Marcus. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know it couldn't have been easy. I'm genuinely happy for you. I know, and I think I'm actually ready to say this. I'm glad you're trying to be better. I'm glad that David has a father committed to doing the work. I'm glad you're going to have 3 other children in your life who will benefit from you becoming more honest. I don't deserve your kindness. No, you don't. But I'm choosing to extend it anyway. Not for you, but for David. For myself. Holding on to anger was exhausting, and I'm tired of being exhausted." They stood together for a moment. 2 people who had once promised forever and learned it wasn't possible for them. But something else was possible. Respect, understanding, grace. "Thank you," Marcus said, "for everything. For David, for the time we had, and for showing me life can go on after betrayal." "It can," Aisha confirmed, "and it should." At the reception, David came to find his father. "Mom's really happy," he said, watching Aisha and her new husband dance. "She is. She deserves to be." "Are you sad?" "A little," Marcus admitted. "But mostly I'm glad she found someone who can love her better than I did." David considered this. "Dr. Thompson says sometimes people can love each other but not be good together. Dr. Thompson is very wise. She also says you're getting better, that you're doing hard work." "I'm trying." David nodded, apparently satisfied. Then he took Marcus's hand. Come dance with me before the night's over. Not a slow dance. A fun one. So Marcus danced with his son at his ex-wife's wedding. It was awkward and painful and necessary all at once. That summer, Marcus made a decision. He left his position at Wellington Industries. Not forced out, but because he realized the same patterns that led him into the affair, obsession with work, need to prove his worth through financial success, were still pulling him away from presence. He kept a consulting position, but he took significant time off. He picked David up from school. He spent Wednesday evenings with the Triplets. He went to soccer games and school performances and doctor's appointments. He was, for the first time in his adult life, actually present. 2 years later, Marcus attended his friend James's wedding in Newport, Rhode Island. David was there in a proper tuxedo. During the reception, David excused himself for a drink. While he was gone, a woman approached Marcus. She was striking, tall, with deep brown skin and intelligent eyes, wearing a stunning emerald dress. "You're Marcus Wellington, aren't you?" she said. "I'm Victoria's colleague from the Met. She's mentioned you several times." "Victoria's mentioned me." "She mentioned the whole situation. Your family drama made quite an impact." The woman extended her hand. "I'm Simone. I'm a curator." They talked for the rest of the evening. Simone was intelligent and fascinating, and didn't seem interested in judging him for his past. By the end of the night, he'd asked for her number. David, observing from across the room, gave him a thumbs up. Marcus didn't rush things with Simone. They went on dates. They got to know each other slowly. She met his children gradually. She was patient with them, kind to them, interested in understanding their individual personalities. By the following June, Marcus proposed to Simone in a garden where she'd curated an exhibition about marriage and love throughout history. She said yes. Marcus called everyone he loved before announcing it to the wider world. Aisha said, "I'm happy for you. She seems genuinely good." "She is. And this time, I'm not going to mess it up." "I believe you," Aisha said. "Not because I think you're perfect now, but because I think you understand what you stand to lose." The wedding was smaller than Marcus's first one, more intimate. Theodore and Victoria were there, along with David, the Triplets, and close friends. Simone's large family filled several rows, genuinely excited to welcome Marcus into their circle. Dr. Raymond attended as a guest. When Marcus asked why, Dr. Raymond explained that he believed in celebrating his client's genuine progress. Marcus wrote his own vows, acknowledging everything that had brought him here, the pain he'd caused, the work he'd done to change, the unexpected grace of people willing to give him a second chance. "I promise to be honest," he said, looking at Simone. "Even when honesty is hard, I promise to be present. I promise to show up for you the way I should have chosen my first wife. I promise to be the man you deserve. I can't change my past, but I can change my future. And I want that future to be with you." Simone cried, which meant he'd succeeded in saying what needed to be said. After the ceremony, during the reception, Aisha pulled him aside. "She's wonderful," Aisha said. "I think you're actually going to make this work." "I'm going to try." "You've been trying for 3 years now. I think it's working." She smiled, free of bitterness or lingering resentment. "I'm proud of you." I never thought I'd say that again, but I am. The years that followed weren't without challenges. Blended families were complicated. The Triplets took time accepting Simone. David had moments where memories of the divorce resurfaced. Marcus had moments when he wanted to slip back into old patterns, when constant honesty felt exhausting. But he didn't slip. He kept going to therapy. He kept showing up for his children. He kept choosing presence over performance, honesty over deception. When David graduated as valedictorian, his speech was about resilience and redemption. He talked about his parents' divorce not as tragedy, but as a turning point that led everyone toward better, more authentic versions of themselves. "My father made mistakes," David said, looking at Marcus. "Big ones. The kind that destroy families and create wounds taking years to heal. But he also did something rare. He actually changed. He didn't just apologize. He did the work to become trustworthy again. That taught me something important about what it means to be human. We're all capable of incredible failure. But we're also capable of choosing to be better. Marcus cried during that speech, not for himself, but for the fact that his son had transformed betrayal and pain into something approaching wisdom. When Eleanor turned 5, she had 2 birthday parties, one with her immediate family, and one with Theodore's entire extended family, including Marcus and Simone, and the triplets and Aisha, and her husband. Eleanor loved having such a large family. She moved between clusters of people with the confidence of a child who had grown up understanding that family could take many forms. "My daddy's godfather," Eleanor told her kindergarten class. When her teacher asked what a godfather was, she said, "Someone who promises to help you be a good person even when it's hard. Someone who loves your family and shows up for you." When Theodore told that story to Marcus later, both of them laughed. "That's actually a pretty good definition," Theodore said. "She's wise for 5. She had good role models," Theodore said pointedly. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Simone made a comment that stopped Marcus. "I never worry about you," she said. "Not like Aisha must have worried. I never go to sleep wondering if you're somewhere else, if you're lying, if you're betraying me. That's such an incredible gift you're giving me. The gift of not having to doubt you. That's the bare minimum of what you deserve. I know. But it's still a gift, because not everyone is capable of giving it. And you had to work incredibly hard to become someone who could." David got married at 30. He married a woman named Jessica, who had no connection to his family's drama. At the wedding reception, Jessica approached Marcus and thanked him for showing her what a man who's willing to do the hard work of change actually looks like. "Your son is the best version of that. He learned from your mistakes in a way that made him better." When Marcus turned 60, his family threw him a surprise party. It included people from every chapter of his life: Theodore and Victoria, Aisha and her husband David, all his children, David, Sophie, Michael, and Anna, ranging from 15 to 25. It included Simone and her family. It included Dr. Raymond. As Marcus looked around the room, he felt genuine peace. Not the artificial peace from maintaining lies, but real peace from having faced the worst in himself and chosen to become better. Before the party ended, David pulled him aside. "I wanted to thank you for something," David said. "I wanted to thank you for being someone I could learn from. Not by following your example, but by learning what happens when you do the hard work of changing. You've taught me what matters. So thank you." Marcus hugged his son, unable to find the right words. When Eleanor's birth announcement arrived, Marcus understood what it meant. His first grandchild. A daughter named Eleanor, after Theodore's daughter, after the child who had taught the family what it meant to build something authentic from broken pieces. Eleanor would be born into a family that had learned, through pain and failure, and genuine commitment, what it meant to love honestly. She would grow up knowing her grandfather as a man who had made terrible mistakes and spent his life becoming trustworthy. She would be part of a family that had learned that redemption was possible. 20 years after everything fell apart, Marcus received a text from Diane. She was married now to Robert, who had adopted the triplets. The triplets had stability, had love, had a father figure who could be fully present. The text said, "I don't regret what I did at the wedding. It was right, even though it hurt everyone. Thank you for actually changing instead of just pretending." Marcus saved the text. He kept it in a folder with other messages. Evidence of a life rebuilt. Proof that redemption was possible. On what would have been his 40th anniversary with Aisha, Marcus thought about the early years. The gallery opening where he'd first seen her. The depth of love he'd felt before ambition and insecurity got in the way. He'd never stopped loving her. But he'd loved her incorrectly. Possessing rather than knowing. Taking rather than giving. Now with Simone, he was learning what correct love meant. Not with intensity, but with commitment. Not with desperation, but with quiet certainty. He called Aisha. "Hi," she said when she heard his voice. No surprise. They talked regularly now, usually about David. "I was thinking about the early days," Marcus said. "I wanted to tell you something." "Okay. I loved you," he said. "I've realized that recently. I don't say this to undo anything, or suggest things could have been different. But I wanted you to know that what I felt was real. I just didn't know how to love you the way you deserved. Aisha was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I do understand. And thank you for saying that. I needed to hear it, even after all these years. Not to change anything, but just to know that I wasn't imagining something that was never real. You weren't imagining anything. What was real was destroyed by my failures, but it was real. I know, Aisha said, and I've made peace with that. I hope you've made peace with it too. I'm working on it, Marcus said. Every day. Epilogue. 30 years after everything fell apart, Marcus sat on the porch of a small house in Connecticut. He was 83 years old, retired for the past decade, living quietly with Simone. His grandchildren filled the space with laughter and the beautiful chaos of family. David came to sit beside him, both watching the children play in the yard. I've been thinking about writing something, David said, about the family history, about what happened and how we all moved through it. Will you tell the truth? Of course. It's the only way the story means anything. Marcus nodded. He liked the idea of truth being preserved, of future generations understanding not just the scandal, but the redemption that followed. Your mother will be in it, David said, as the woman who had every right to walk away, but found a way to move forward with grace. And Diane, as a woman who forced a confrontation nobody wanted but everybody needed. She didn't accept being hidden, and in refusing she freed all of us. And me? As a man who made catastrophic mistakes and spent the rest of his life trying to be better. Not as a hero, but as someone real. Someone who learned that redemption isn't about erasing your past. It's about committing to a different future. Marcus felt peace settle over him. Not the peace of erasure, but the peace of having faced the worst in himself and chosen better. Eleanor came running onto the porch, demanding that both her grandfather and father come play. They stood up. Marcus took Eleanor's small hand, and they walked into the yard where the other children were playing. Simone watched from the window, her expression full of the kind of love that comes from knowing someone completely and choosing them anyway. She had never asked Marcus to be perfect. She had only asked him to be real, and in learning how to be real, he had become something approaching worthy of the love she'd offered. The end. This story, from the moment Marcus received that text while his wife labored to give birth, to this moment 30 years later surrounded by an extended family built through failures and their choice to move forward, is a story about the possibility of redemption. Not redemption erasing the past, but redemption transforming it into something meaningful. Not easy redemption, but real redemption earned through genuine commitment to change.